Hi, I'm Rick Grant, President of RGA Public Relations, and I want to thank Mortgage Dashboard for giving me a few minutes to talk to you about something I think is really important, and it's public relations. Well, I'm not talking about public relations you may be familiar with, like our fathers or grandfathers' public relations. It's not the same anymore. There's a lot of changes. But if you figure out how to use it, you can really improve your loan origination business. First, how has public relations changed? Well, in the old days, PR was primarily used as kind of like media relations between companies and big media, television, newspapers. And it was primarily, well, for most companies, it was used as crisis control. Something went wrong, they would hire someone to go into the newspapers and try to control the story. There were very few companies that were really, really good at public relations, and really none in our space, because as you know, our business is about loan documents and dealing with the secondary market and not really about consumers, although that's surely going to change. Today, public relations is a lot different than that. Today, we're not just dealing with the media, which we would call one target public, but we're also dealing with a bunch of others. In fact, public relations today, because of all the new media that we have and all the new ways people have to connect with each other, really looks a lot like old-style marketing. In fact, some companies have been tempted to give PR over to the marketing department, but that really doesn't work, and I'll tell you why. Public relations and marketing are fundamentally different in the kinds of stories that they tell. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the kind of stories you should be telling. But in general, marketing stories are all about us, what we do, why we're better, why you should work with us, and the cool things that we have. PR stories are about what's important to the people you're writing to. Actually, PR and marketing are nowhere near the same. And I have a hard time with this sometimes because I know some great marketing people and they want to get in there and they want to handle this and they want to do all the social media stuff and they just can't do it because even though they're totally authentic and totally telling the truth or what they believe to be the truth about their product and their services, those are not the messages that feel authentic to the people in those social media websites and those new networks, and so it just doesn't work. Media relations wasn't about that. Media relations was about story control. This is about trying to come up with stories that will appeal to the people that you want to do business with. And increasingly, we're seeing those show up online in social media sites like Facebook and Twitter. Now, I know many of you probably saw the FFIEC's flyer that came out warning financial institutions to take great care in social media, and it scared some banks away from using social media the way they could. In fact, some companies that wanted to sell compliance products to banks really played up those fears. But the truth is, there's nothing in what the FFIEC, what the CFPB, or any other regulator has said so far that would prevent you from using social media if you use it right. Actually, did you read what the FFIEC put out? It changed nothing. I mean, nothing. All it said was the same rules that you had to watch for and abide by before with other types of advertising, you have to abide by in social media. I can't understand why people made a huge deal out of this. There's no huge deal. They didn't say you can't use it. All right, I want to come back to social media in a minute and talk to you about which tools you might use to share your stories. But first, let's talk about what stories you should be telling. All right. Now remember, in the old days of marketing, the stories were all about us, and we have this, and we do this, and we're great because of this. And that may work for car dealers, right? Because they're selling a Ford F-150, and you want to know about that truck and what it can do, and how much it can haul, and all those fun things. But you know, consumers don't care about loan products. That's kind of a little known secret. I'm sharing that with you. They don't care. They don't understand them. They don't know what they are. All consumers want is money. They want money to close their deal on a new home. So they think in terms of mortgages, in terms of dollar amounts. I got a $50,000 mortgage, I got a $100,000, $250,000 mortgage, or whatever, right? They don't think of it as a stack of paperwork like we do. They think of it as a stack of cash. Well, that's not the mortgage. That's just the result of the mortgage. And so consumers have no real concept of what we do. So if you're talking to consumers about loan products, you're pretty much talking to yourself. And that's crazy. Right, so what should you be talking to consumers about? Well, You should be talking about what matters to them. And here's where we get into a problem. Because a lot of lenders will go out and say, well, consumers want low interest rates and they want this and they want that. And they forget that consumers are not all cut from the same cloth, right? You have to segment that market. So we have consumers that are first-time home buyers, who are refinance business, who are maybe move-up buyers. We have reverse mortgage buyers. We have all kinds of different people, and the stories you tell those people are different too. You have to find out what they care about. Believe me, a first-time home buyer is not going to care anything about your reverse mortgage product unless he thinks he can get an older relative out of his home and into their own home or something like that, right? Which is not how those products work. So they don't care. There's nothing you can say about those that's going to appeal to that target public. Likewise, a vet who wants a VA loan is not really going to care about the same thing that maybe a first-time home buyer is. And don't be stingy when you do your target segments. Think of everybody that you come in contact with. And believe me, everybody needs a different story. They don't all need the same kind of stories. The stories that you're telling realtors you want to work with will not be the same as the stories you tell title companies that you want to work with or title agents, right? So figure out who those target publics are and make sure you're telling stories that appeal to them. Once we segment up these target publics, we can start thinking about what kinds of stories are going to appeal to them. But ultimately, if we want it to serve us, we still have to tell stories that will benefit us. I'm not talking about marketing. I'm not talking going back to the days when it's all about us, me, and we sing the song and we follow the marketing collateral playbook from the marketing department. No, I'm talking about coming up with stories about us that appeal to them. Let me show you a graphic to talk about what I'm talking about. Once you know what you want to sell, then you have to know where you want to go. That's just a matter of determining where you are today and where you want to be in the future. This beginning state and end state is critical, and it has to be mapped out in terms of metrics that are measurable before we can ever develop a strategy to get you from one to the other. That gap analysis between where you want to be and where you are today is what will determine everything else that we do. It's basically like a ladder that will take you from the present state to the future. Now, this isn't really a ladder at all. It's a grid that we use to help map out an effective communication strategy. And it starts with the target publics, the people that you need to appeal to. Now, Tony Robbins put it best. It's the best I ever heard. He said, if you really want something, if you want to be successful, decide what you want, who has it, and then ask them for it. Really, that's it. Find out what you want, who has it, and ask them for it. Well, we've already determined what we want because you've done the gap analysis between where you are today and where you want to be. Every decision we make is based on what we've been told in the form of stories previous to making that decision. So what type of stories does a person have to hear in order to want to be helpful to you, to allow you to influence them? Well, we found 4 types of stories. Stories about who you are, stories about what you do, stories about your success, and most importantly, stories that other people tell about you. Those 4 types of stories, if told effectively, will get enough members of your target public to do what you want them to do in order to get you from where you are today to where you want to be. That's the basis of the strategy. Once those stories are developed, and only after those stories develop, can we start pushing them out through the various tactics, whether that be podcast or Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. These are all social media, but it applies exactly the same to traditional media, events, anything, word of mouth, anything you can imagine. So starting with those tactics before you've done the work of figuring out what stories you need to be telling in the first place is a huge waste of time. Don't do it. Start with a good, sound communication strategy and then apply it to any tactic you want to use. So those are the 4 types of stories that we have to tell, but we have to tell them in a way that appeals to each of these different target publics. So see, it's a puzzle, right? It's a game where we have to figure out how can we talk about what we need to tell them about in a way that appeals to them, that they'll pay attention to, right? The key to this is authenticity. Now, in the early days of the internet, we saw all kinds of companies, huge, even Walmart, trying to make up stories that weren't true, weren't real, weren't genuine in order to appeal to target publics. Like the one I remember was they worked on this family that drove around in an RV and stayed in each one of their parking lots. And they made up these people and who they were and what they did. And people started following them and they got engaged and they wanted to meet these people. And then they found out it was all made up by a PR firm and there was huge backlash. In an advertisement, You can write, we're the best lender in the world, and whether you are or not, people won't care. They're not looking at that. They're looking at the rate that you're promising or something else, right? And in an ad, they expect you to lie. But in PR, especially when it goes online to social media, these people on these networks expect you to tell the truth. And when you lie to them even once, it creates a huge backlash, and it can be very difficult to recover from. So we have to tell stories to these four groups that are true, they're authentic, but they also appeal to them. See, it's that puzzle. People like me think this is awesome. We think it's great. You're probably trying to write mortgage loans, so you really don't like it as much as I do, but you've got to do it if you want to appeal to these publics using these new tools like social media. Now, why don't we just hand this off to the marketing department? That's what they do. Let them handle it. Because marketing people are trained to talk about you and your company and your product and what you do. And guess what? Consumers don't care. They don't care. They're never going to care, right? All they want is a stack of money that's equal to or greater than the house they want to buy, so they can pay their closing costs and move their family in. That's it. If you're not telling stories and helping them do that, you're wasting your time and you're wasting their time, and you're not going to get their business. All right, so what do you do with these stories once they're done? Well, you distribute them, disseminate them, get them out to the public in every possible way, whether that's traditional through a press release or through social media, right? And this is what really annoys me about people in the market right now, is because people will come up to you, literally come up to you on the street and tell you that they have a way for you to make a ton of money with this new online social media tool. Maybe it's Facebook, or maybe it's LinkedIn or Twitter, right? And they'll say, this is how you're going to make your money. And so you ask them, well, how? And they'll tell you some story. We know, for instance, that an increasing number of older Americans are embracing Facebook. They find it easy to use, easy to share information, and they can see their grandkids. So if we know they're there and we're selling reverse mortgages, we have to take our stories there. But we don't just get on Facebook and say, hey, old people, come and follow us. No, we have to have stories that appeal to them. But we've already done that work, right? We already looked at where we are, where we want to be, looked at the target publics we have to appeal to get there, and come up with the 4 types of stories that will appeal to that target public. Now we just put it there. What annoys me is sometimes people come up to you and they'll say, well, Facebook is going to solve all your problems. And Facebook will solve exactly none of your problems, unless you have good, authentic stories to tell the people who are on Facebook. In fact, what I would say, if somebody comes up to you and says that they're going to use one tool to save your business and that it's a social media tool, show them the door. It'll never work. It's kind of like Mr. Goodrich. Do you go in to get your car fixed and expect that guy to come out with one wrench to fix your car? No, he's got a ton of tools to fix your car, and he's going to use every tool that he needs to make sure your car gets back on the road. Well, it's the same with social media tools. Once you have your stories, you need to use Facebook and Twitter and probably LinkedIn and maybe Pinterest or who knows what. As many as you can find, YouTube videos, as many ways as you can appeal to the people you want to talk to. How many places should you tell your story? You can never be done. Millions. Every possible place you can tell your story, you should. And the technology we have today makes it really easy. That's the use of social media. The time to think about which tools to use is after you've already got your stories written. And now, you know what kind of stories to write. Good luck with your business.